My name is Francois Nordia, and I'm a super teacher. And this is Super Teachers Unite, the show that's all about motivating, inspiring, and supporting teachers. And tonight, we've got a great show lined up for you. With me, I've got my good friend and our guest all the way from British Columbia in Canada, Tim Cavey. Tim, thank you very much for being with us.
Hey, my pleasure. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for having me.
So just for everybody that's tuning in, whether you are listening to this later on the podcast or on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you're listening to, this is a live recording. This is now the second time we're doing this recording in front of a live studio audience. I mean, the coronavirus and the subsequent lockdown has forced us to do interviews online, which is actually amazing because it gave us the opportunity to meet each other finally on a platform like this, Tim, because there's no way that my budget is going to allow me to travel to Canada to come and do a full show with you over there.
South Africa is on my dream list. It hasn't happened yet. I trust that it will someday.
Well, we've got great hospitable people here. So if you're ever in the country, let me know because I can hook you up with places to stay. We'll take you on a good safari or two and show you a good time here. But I'm telling you, I'm definitely also wanting to travel to Canada. I've got a few other friends also living there. So it'll be great to come and visit you. But here we are on a platform. I'm in the Southern Hemisphere. You're in the Northern Hemisphere. But we've got the opportunity to talk all things education. And I'm very, very excited for that. So for everybody who doesn't know Tim is also the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. He's an author as well because he writes, he's got his own magazine called the Teachers on Fire magazine, which is posted on Medium. It's not a platform that's very familiar in South Africa, but I'm hoping that it's really going to pick up soon. So if you have a look, actually, if you're joining us in the live studio audience, at the bottom here, there's a link that says 9 ways the coronavirus will improve education. If you click on that, it's going to take you to the Medium post that Tim wrote about the 9 ways that the coronavirus will improve education. But I will also be linking it in the show notes and everywhere where I'm going to be posting this episode so that people can go and read the work that you do, but also go over to the Teachers on Fire podcast and listen to the amazing content that Tim puts up there, because he showcases pretty much in the same way that we're doing here. We're showcasing the superheroes of education and showing what is possible when positive, like-minded educators come together from all over the world and seeing what amazing difference we can make. Tim, I posted your bio up in the chat here for everybody in the live audience, but I think just some of the highlights from that and getting to know you, of course, it's amazing to see, and I didn't know this, sneaky that you slipped this one in, that you're taking up a vice principalship in the fall. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
We've got a vice principal Tim in the on stage today, so I'm very, very excited to jump in and talk. But before we get into the content, our live studio audience, everybody that is here, can I please ask you to go and vote in the polls? We are doing something new on the show where we'll have the Design a Lesson Challenge. For those of you that tuned in last week Friday, you had the opportunity to participate. This is at the end of the show. Myself and Tim and our audience are going to design a lesson together, but we've got no idea how we're going to do it because our audience is going to select the subjects that we will be teaching as well as the phase of schooling that it will be happening in. So we've got no idea. This is going to be a total creative endeavor, and we'll jump into that. But I need everybody that is in our live studio audience to please go and select the polls. And just vote in both. There are 2 separate polls. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask Tim, please pop it in the Ask a Question tab, and I'll ask the most upvoted question. I'll ask that to Tim throughout the interview. But I think that's enough of the housekeeping stuff. Let's get into the gist of our conversation. Now, as you know, with this show, I always ask our guests, what is it that's on their heart, what they'd like to share with teachers in general. And Tim said he would really like to talk about this concept of the coronavirus. And I mean, it's something very apt for all of our teachers, but how, and I love this, how it's going to improve education. Tim, over to you. Let's see where this goes.
Thank you so much again, Francois, for having me. And you described me as a super teacher, and I want to qualify that to say that I am far from perfect, as anyone who has worked with me will acknowledge. But I think we share an understanding that super teachers and teachers on fire are people who embrace a growth mindset, right? Who are real about their journey, who are always looking to improve, incrementally grow, and move the needle in their own practice. And of course, kids benefit when that happens. So thank you so much again for that lovely introduction. And yes, I'm very excited to take on a little bit of administration in the fall. I'll be about half in the classroom, half in the administration role. And that's going to be great for me. And I'm actually glad that I'm going to be staying in the classroom to some degree, because I think that's really important for the work that I do with Teachers on Fire, is to have that foot in the classroom and stay in touch, in close contact with kids. But yeah, so this, I've been doing some writing, trying to keep my reflective process active throughout the coronavirus. And obviously, Canadians, Americans, South Africans, anyone around the world, we can share this experience of, a lot of discouragement, a lot of depression, and sometimes it can be difficult to see hope, because honestly, we don't even know what the future holds. I was looking at some of your Twitter feed, Francois, and I can see South Africa. It sounds like the rumblings are starting to happen about reopening schools and sort of where that will go and how that will unfold. And there's a lot of anxiety around that here as well. We are, in my district, we are scheduled to start a gradual reintegration or reopening of schools, very gradual, starting June 1st. And so there's a lot of anxiety and questioning. And, people are even looking ahead to the fall, which is the start of our next school year, and saying, what is this going to look like? How can we do this safely? And will it sort of be this multifaceted, part in class, part online approach? What shape will that take? So many questions. But I wrote this article, thank you so much for mentioning it, 9 ways that Corona will improve K-12 education, with an idea to say, okay, this situation sucks, to put it bluntly. It's awful for kids. It's not ideal for educators, although I understand that, there are some silver linings to working at home, but this is not an ideal situation. How can where are the positives here that we can take from this and really use that momentum to change, to make a permanent change and impact in how we do K-12 education? So I'm not going to read the whole post, but I will sort of go through the 9 points, if I might, really quickly, and just talk about, here are the positives from my perspective about, how this might really improve K-12 education. So number 1, improved responses to learning inequities. You and I talked the other day on Instagram Live, Francois, about just the reality that not every kid has access to Wi-Fi and to devices at home. And so we have this growing divide between the haves and the have-nots. And we have affluent schools and districts are able to continue their learning. Other kids are not. And so that's a big problem that we need to address. And I'm hoping countries the world over will address it. Number 2, increased attention to the SEL.
Before we go on,
yeah, go ahead.
Before we go on, I think that's such a relevant point, and it's part of the we really need to unpack some of this. I mean, here we are. We're in South Africa. We're considered a developing country. A lot of people refer to us as a third world country. I mean, in Africa, and there's a lot of stigma about being on the African content and African education. Now, you just mentioned that there's inequalities in education in Canada, and I mean, we often just say, you know what, woe is us. In South Africa, things are really bad. But you mentioned that there's inequalities and this digital divide in Canada. I didn't, and I think a lot of my audience and South African teachers thought that, Canada is seen as this amazing education country. I mean, how is it possible that even in Canada that there are children that don't have access to the internet? Maybe give us some background on what that access to the internet is like in Canada.
Hey, listen, don't think for a moment that Canada and the United States have this figured out either. I was listening to a podcast the other day where educators in New York State, and we always think of New York City as this, world city, right there in New York State, educators who are trying to do this remote learning without even having reliable internet, in some parts of upstate New York. So I would say Number one, in any American state or Canadian province, you've got districts in rural areas that really struggle to have the sort of internet speeds and access that we would be accustomed to. They're not able to stream video the way you and I are doing that right now. And then secondly, now I will acknowledge some privilege here that I work at an independent school or a private school, whatever name you want to use. And I happen to know that every single one of my 28 eighth graders has a laptop, many of them MacBooks. Okay, so that gives you an idea of sort of where they're coming from. And all of their homes have high-speed internet. And so they are able to really participate at a high level. In fact, they've hardly missed a beat. On the other hand, right here in my own city of Surrey, just outside Vancouver, we have immigrant families, people of all from the full range of socioeconomic privilege who may not have more than one device in the home. They may not necessarily have the same internet speed that we really need to participate in video and so forth. So I think it's foolish to assume that, or it's a mistake, not foolish. It's a mistake to assume that any country really has this completely figured out, that there are no inequities. And yeah, we're with you. We're in solidarity with you, South Africa, that we've got these kids who in many cases just cannot participate. And so what can we do about that? Well, there are different answers. I think one might be legislation, frankly, that starts to say that one way or another, we are going to provide Wi-Fi and internet to every single household. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know where that money comes from or how that infrastructure happens. I'm actually reading Born a Crime right now, Trevor Noah. And so I have a few insights, a bit of a sense about sort of where your country has been. But it's the same questions here, because economically it's really hard to provide a reliable internet to people in rural areas. It doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint, but what you're saying here is that what the coronavirus is doing is it's actually going to showcase the need for internet connectivity throughout the world. Otherwise, I think the two of us spoke about it on Instagram the other night. Internet access should actually be a basic human right. We're at that point where access to information cannot be given to some people and others because of the major inequalities that is caused by the fact that we would all go into absolute riot if certain people in a country have got access to water and others don't. Right.
And I think, and I know it's not a basic human physiological need, but I mean, we are creating a massive injustice and this disparity in opportunities because people don't have access to the internet.
100%. And I think something that people need to understand, and from some quarter, I don't know what the political spectrum is like in South Africa, but sometimes there's resistance against these socialist movements that take our tax dollars and sort of hand out free benefits to people, right? Depending on where you are in your political thinking. But I think something those critics need to understand is that we all win when kids win, right? When we have an educated society where every person feels heard and seen and they are a participant in the process, we all win as a country, as a society. So yeah, it's a grand vision, but that's one thing that I hope really changes long term in the K-12 education scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear what some of the others are. I don't think we might have time to delve into all nine of your topics, but I mean, pick a few and we'll really unpack some of them.
Well, you stop me, Francois, because I can go a long time. I'm a podcaster, so I can talk. But number two, increased attention to social emotional needs of learners. I mean, SEL was a huge buzzword, a huge conversation piece before this whole crisis began. Now it's just become massive. And we know that people are struggling just in their emotional health right now. And you speak so well to teachers, by the way. I really appreciate everything you put out there on your social media about just our need to get outside. Well, when we can, when we're allowed to get outside, to work out, to exercise, to do all of that stuff. Number three, this is another huge one, assessment practices. So a lot of education leaders right now have said, in this environment where we do have some inequities, some students cannot participate as much as others, you are not allowed to grade students, at least not negatively. So you can't take their mark down whatsoever during this remote learning experience. You can only move them up. You can only reflect growth and improvement. And really, there's a call toward the shift of, feedback over grades. And I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, I think we need to start asking the question, is that not best practice, at least to some extent? I don't know exactly where you sit on this, but and assessment is like one of those issues that tends to get really emotional for educators because we all have our loyalties and our beliefs. But there is a really unique situation right now where students are not being negatively graded. They're just receiving a lot of feedback in most North American districts. It's formative assessment. It's, teacher support and a sort of a positive orientation. And I just think it's super interesting. I think there's a lot that we can take forward from that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think in South Africa, especially, I don't know what the case is in Canada, but in South Africa, we've got these high stakes exams at the end of every single year, and everything is so exam focused. I mean, at the beginning of our academic year in January, our Minister of Education announces what the pass rate is, and we've got this big celebration every single year when they announce that we've got 75% of our, well, this year it was 80, just over 80% of our grade 12s passed their final exam. And everybody freaks out because that's so amazing, when at the end of the day, that's a very myopic view, because it's actually just 80% of the grade 12s that entered into the exams showed enough competence to pass a written exam. And does that really reflect the skills and the aptitudes of those kids? And our entire education system and all the way in which teachers are teaching is towards the assessment and not towards learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll keep going if that's okay.
Yeah, cool.
I'm going to skip one and say, I love this one. This is close to my heart. More of an investment in asynchronous teaching practices and resources. So what I mean by I'm sure everyone's familiar with that term of asynchronous, but right now in my own teaching, I've got 28 eighth graders, as I said, and I really only meet with them in real time at 9 o'clock every morning. And we have a circle check-in, and we sort of ask some light questions, some check-in questions, some temperature reading, kind of get a sense of how everyone's feeling. Then we talk about the plan for the day, and then I dismiss them and they're on their way for the day. And everything else that they do, I've prepared, I've posted, I've created videos, and they just walk through that on their own time. And the beauty of the asynchronous resources, when I make a video, when I offer a tutorial, when I walk students through something, that video can be viewed, they can pause it, they can rewind, they can rewatch, and I can share that video with other teachers in my department. I can use it in future years. And I just think like teachers have not been thinking in this headspace for, we've never really been thinking, most of us, I'll speak for myself, I've never really been thinking like that in the past. And I just think, why am I not, even in quote normal school, why am I not creating more video content? Sometimes it's called the flipped classroom, right? Where students can sort of watch video outside of class and do that groundwork. And then the in-class time is a time less for instruction, more for real-time support. And so I hope that changes my practice, and I hope that spreads as well, because as you know, YouTube is a fantastic how-to search engine, right? I mean, whether it's math, whether it's tech, whether it's design, I teach entrepreneurship, video arts and video making, whatever it is, kids should be able to go and learn on their own, because that's such an essential skill as well. So just the shift to asynchronous teaching resources, being a little bit more efficient with our time and the way we instruct, it gets me really excited.
Well, let's look at what the effect is going to be going forward, at least for the next year, 18 months, is that, let's say, for instance, there might be some kids who get exposed to the virus, and they would need to self-isolate or quarantine with their family, and they can't get to school, while other kids who are healthy and haven't been exposed are going to be at school. So right. What are you going to do? Are you going to teach in real time to the kids in the class, and then try and catch up with the kids that are at home later? Or can you approach just asynchronicity, prepare, like flip the classroom, give to everybody the resources of the lesson material, the actual knowledge that they need to know, and then you use the class time to really go deep, and you maybe do project-based learning, you have discussions in your classroom that really just facilitates or supports the learning part. Because face it, we can record the same content and then just play it year after year after year, because that's basically what we've been doing in real-time teaching.
Yes, in many cases. Now, we always want to have a spirit of innovation and improvement and self-reflection, of course. So we're not going to use the same video content that we made in 1990. But yes, absolutely, there's a repeatability about a lot of what we're doing. And I love your point about the inequities, right? I wasn't even really going in that direction. But yeah, a student could be out of the process for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and then jump in and really, if they're committed, if they've got that support, just follow the breadcrumbs and sort of catch themselves up. And so that's super exciting as well. Can I say one?
We can do it. We've got time for one more, but I want to jump in here. I want to know what your thoughts are, because I've been playing around with this idea quite a bit of decentralized schooling. And I really like the concept if you can make it work, because face it, the school building itself is a physical place where we get kids together to learn, because it's like the hub where you've got the teachers, you've got the management staff, you've got the kids together. And the internet is taking away the necessity of actually having that physical building. Mm-hmm. What would happen if we decentralize schooling in such a way that kids can have access to the best teachers in the world? For instance, if I want to learn mathematics, I can go to a teacher in Finland who is an absolute mathematics expert, learn from them. Can go to Belgium for my social science, or wherever you are. You get the idea. But that you still have a physical building that has that gives you the access to the resources to help you learn, instead of having the centralized schooling. I just thought that I'd pitch that to you and hear what your idea is.
And I think a lot of districts maybe aren't seeing that vision, but Francois, I think it's coming. I think you're right on. And, we see glimpses of it already with, I'm using Khan Academy. I'm sure some of your listeners or viewers are familiar with Khan Academy. So I'm using Khan Academy to deliver math instruction right now for my 8th graders. I've used it for coding in the past. And Khan Academy is just one example of a portal, a learning portal that right now is free. Now, they're asking for a lot of donations because I know their traffic has spiked way high, but right now it's free. And it is a self-guided tutorial system. If you've never been inside it, it's essentially video exercise, application, and so on. Wonderful platform. Is it perfect? No, but it delivers really quality teaching to anyone in the world. So I love what you're saying about what we're moving towards is this incredible vision where, I might have students in South Africa and my kids might be taught by teachers in South Africa. So, why not?
Yeah, awesome. Let's do one more, and then we can go into the next segment of the show.
Well, something that just is good practice, best practice in the classroom is allowing students to learn from each other. And we think about peer assessment, and just this idea that I always tell my students, everything is remix. In other words, everything we create and build and learn is inspired by influences from other people. And so I think it just makes sense, even in normal school, it's for kids to be sharing their work, but in this environment, even more so. And so it's been exciting for me. I've used tools like Flipgrid and the Seesaw blog in the past. I don't know how familiar your viewers are with those tools, but I'm in a Seesaw school. And so I've been asking my students to just push everything out to the Seesaw blog, which means that everyone in the class and the parents can see their work, which is really exciting. And also been using, of course, as I mentioned, Flipgrid, which is just a phenomenal tool. Padlet is another new one that I've been using, and there are a few others. But to me, that's been super exciting to just say, okay, our kids are missing the community aspect right now, or at least the actual community. They're not in the same space. How can we improve? How can I improve the level at which they are sharing their work with each other and inspiring each other? And so I've seen some really cool things that I'm going to be bringing back into my practice going forward.
So what I'm hearing you saying here is what the coronavirus is basically doing is it's forcing us to accelerate the thinking around education. I mean, the things we're talking about, it's not new. This has been around for 10, 20 years. And what we are now necessitated to do this, and I think that's the takeaway we can take from lockdown, quarantine, coronavirus, is that we are being forced to accelerate these innovative education practices. And I, for one, I'm very excited about the future. The point just being that you will need super teachers to implement these strategies. If you are going to be a mediocre teacher, there's going to be very little space for you. If you're going to be a bad teacher, you're going to be out. It's going to be as simple as that. So it calls on teachers to elevate our practice, and it calls on us to do professional development and keep up with the times.
And even professional development is changing and improving as well. I mean, I can only speak to my context. We're still slowly evolving. We've still got the conference model, right? The 1 day or 2 day conference, where teachers get spoken to a whole lot, and sometimes the workshop choices aren't really the best fit. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're seeing right now is that in this remote learning environment, there's more of what you and I are doing, where other educators can jump on, and if what we're talking about resonates with them, either live or on the replay, then they can plug into that. And so I hope this remote learning experience also moves professional development forward, because that's a really important piece too, as you know.
Exactly. We can't be preaching during professional development about innovation and learner-centeredness when the actual workshop of professional development is done as a lecture. How does that even make sense? So and that's one thing that I'm starting to do a lot of, and that's why even this interview is being done as a live studio audience thing, because we can get direct live input. I've got my WhatsApp community, which is a small community of teachers who I get direct feedback from. I ask them, what kind of professional development do you want? Let's go and create a bespoke a workshop or event around what you need, and then get the people who are like-minded together and then do the professional development around that.
Yeah, and I love the comment right there. This is such an exciting time to be a teacher, because we are creating the new way of teaching. And absolutely, I mean, you mentioned 10, 20 years ago, some of this technology is only 10 years old. I mean, the ability to stream in real time is not too old. And so we see things moving very quickly, and yet they're set to take this next very significant, very impactful step forward. You talked about decentralization, and man, you're giving me goosebumps here.
Exciting stuff. Tim, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, the article is titled 9 Ways That the Coronavirus Will Improve K-12 Teaching. In South Africa, of course, we talk about grade R for reception here, for R to 12. But I think the premise is universal, that education can't be done the same after our lockdown and coronavirus as then it was beforehand, because then we've learned nothing from the crisis. So please go and check that out. I'm going to link it. It is linked up in the live now, but I'm going to link it up on all the social media platforms when I share this episode as well. So thank you for that. But I think it's time that we get to know Tim, because most of my audience, I don't think, have been exposed to you. But I would really like to know, Tim, what is your superpower?
Well, I thought this question might come. I think one of my superpowers is this ability to network, or I would call it a passion to network and connect. And so that is something that I've done. Looking back in my career, I've really enjoyed doing that, building those connections on my own staff. And, you know, that sort of takes different expressions, but I think it's been really, really important during the remote learning environment to increase our communication, and whether that's collaboration through the G Suite, we talked about that earlier, or, you know, getting into some more efficient means of instant messaging. And then, of course, in my professional learning network, that's a real joy as well, to connect with other educators on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and all of these places. sometimes we're limited by time. It's hard to connect with all of these constituents every single day, but I love it. There's so much life. We talked about Twitter earlier today, and if you will go onto Twitter and build an education-only following, I think that part is really important. I always tell people, do not follow Donald Trump, or you will end up in a whole other world of hurt. But and I just mean the discussion and the partisan politics around that. But if you build an education-only community, it is so uplifting and so inspiring, and that is something that I thrive on personally. So that is one of my superpowers for sure.
That's amazing. I can attest to this because that's why the two of us actually met, is because both of us, it's so cool, because that's the answer I give when people ask me what my superpower is. And it's exactly that. It's bringing people together. And if you didn't use social media in the way you did, and I didn't use social media in the way I did, this whole interview wouldn't have happened. And I, for one, am glad that you're such a great networker.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to make a comment there. At least your politicians are active on social media. Our politicians they're not active whatsoever. We've got one politician in education that's quite active on Twitter, but he's a very divisive figure as well. No. But the rest of the politicians is difficult to get hold of. But at least your politicians, I'm not saying Trump is your politician, but at least there's access. That you've got a shot in the dark to actually make an impact on social media with them. And I think this is another thing that you mentioned, that on Twitter, people, and I said it in our discussion earlier, people view Twitter as like the cesspool of social media because there's really negative things happening there. But you've got the choice who you're following. You've got the choice what type of content you're putting out on social media. And this is the amazing thing about the social media algorithms, is that it pushes to you the content that you like. So if you're continuously seeing hateful things on social media, ask yourself, what are the things that you're viewing? What are you liking and what are you posting? Because it's giving it right back at you.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, absolutely. You have the power to unfollow people that are really taking you in the wrong emotional direction, right? You can unfollow, and even as you said, I mean, most of these algorithms will notice if you never respond or reciprocate with people. They will just fall further and further in your feed, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. So I agree. We get what we put in, generally speaking, into social media. And like I said, I just can't overstate that. It is a wonderful place when you really take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would really like to encourage all teachers to start using social media more for their professional life. And I know it's in our personal capacities, it's fun posting pics on Facebook and Instagram and so, but really start exploring and seeing what educational resources and communities you can find on social media, because that's where the innovative thinkers are. I really think so.
Can I just say quickly on that, Francois, I'm a big believer, and this is not always a popular opinion, but I'm a big believer as well. And you spoke to this just now, in this idea that really it makes sense to niche down in the social media. And so a lot of people will, if they're not big users, they'll sort of balk at the idea of creating a separate teacher account. Like I just want one Instagram account or one Twitter account or whatever. But the experience, I mean, not every teacher wants to see pictures of your dog and your children, right? And not every family member or relative or friend wants to hear about your latest educational musings either. And so it really makes sense to divide those spaces of yourself, in my view. And like I said, I know it's not a popular opinion. You just get so much more out of it. You really optimize those spaces when you say, okay, this account is going to be for this purpose. This one over here is my professional life, and it is a much richer experience, I think.
So I disagree with you there, and I think it's healthy to do that, because I understand the need for it, and I can think that there are people that want to do that. I just think from a practical point of view, that sounds like a lot of admin for me, because I'm on all the different social media platforms.
Right.
But the reason why I enjoy including all of my life in one social media account is because that's what makes me unique. And that's what makes people want to follow me, because I'm not only one-dimensional in the fact that I only am a super teacher. I love CrossFit, I play Magic the Gathering, I run, I've got a family. So all of these things I choose to put out on social media, and the people who resonate with that content are going to keep on following. So you attract your tribe with what you put out. So that's the counter argument to what you just said.
That's a good counter. And I would say this too, as education leaders, if we want people to listen to our ideas, people need to know, like, and trust us. Know, like, and trust. And in order for people to know you, Francois, I mean, I felt like I had some ins into sort of the person you are from some of your fitness content. And so, you know, I would say, even, and maybe it gets messy, but I'll simply say I think you're right on that. Even within my education account, I need to let people know kind of who I am as a person, because people need that connection. That's just a human instinct.
Exactly. And people like you because, number one, of authenticity, because you are who you are. Because a lot of people on social media are putting up this front of, my life is so awesome, look at everything I'm doing. And they're not talking about the difficulties and not putting out the struggles they're going through. But at the end of the day, that's what makes you human. And that's what makes people connect with you as an individual. And I think that's also a big lesson for us to take into the classroom. Because otherwise, we can just put up videos of people talking about content. When your kids get to know you, and I mean, you choose what you share on social media, you choose what you share with the kids. But when they know your interests, it becomes a more flavorful classroom.
Oh, you're preaching my life. I've written about this as well, that when I have guests on my show and I ask them, you know, what is your personal passion? I think that answer is really important. And for the educators who say, well, I don't have time for anything outside of education, I might chuckle on the outside, but on the inside, I'm crying a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you just become more of a human being, and frankly, a better educator when you've got other passions to bring into that classroom. I don't care if it's gardening. I don't care if it's restoring cars, if it's vlogging, gaming, whatever it might be. Bring those things into your practice. Find ways to integrate them and bring those insights, and you'll build better connections with kids, with your students. So absolutely, that, you know, everything you just said there is music to my ears, because if we're one-dimensional educators, then we're not living up to our full potential, I think.
Absolutely. Yes, I can sit and talk to you for hours. This is going well. Before we go into some more questions, for the live studio audience, if you haven't voted in our polls yet, there's 2 polls I need you to vote in at the bottom of the screen here. Just type in the polls, go and vote, because the 2 of us will be, and the audience will be, doing the designer lesson challenge very soon. I've got 2 more questions for Tim before we get into that challenge, and I'm very excited to see what we're going to come up with today. But Tim, I'm going to put you on the spot, because this question just popped up in my head while we were talking. You are now going to become a vice principal for the first time. What's the first thing you're going to do as a vice principal?
I just posted something on my Instagram from Mr. Brian Aspinall about, you know, this idea that as a leader, as an educational leader, our place is not to control people, but to lift people up. And so I think the very first thing, and I know a few people at this particular school, but the very first thing is simply I'm going to go back to the know, like, and trust. Okay. I think I need to build relationships first. And so that's something I want to do is make sure that as a group, collectively, and also individually, I'm just building relationships. And it doesn't have to get more complicated than that. I just want teachers to know that I am there in a supportive role. And I think that's one of the best things that we can do as an education leader, is just be present, be visible, and be supportive, whatever that looks like. And once teachers start to understand that administrators are on their side, that it's not a sort of gotcha, that it's not a sort of they're looking to spot your weaknesses. Sometimes that's kind of the weird perception that we get as teachers. But once they understand that as administrators, we're on the same team and we legitimately want to help you grow, and whatever that looks like, I think our jobs as leaders get a lot easier. So yeah, I think, we can get into the practical, what that looks like practically, but in general terms, I just want to start by affirming and building relationships.
I absolutely love that, because I think in many cases, if somebody gets a prominent administrative position like that, it can quickly go to their heads and it becomes a thing of, well, I'm the boss now and you better listen to what I have to say.
Right.
When it's actually the reverse, where you become the servant of servants and you get to know what the needs are, and basically amplifying or allowing the resources for teachers to really prosper and do what they think is best for their teaching. So thank you for sharing that. Then our last question before we get into the designer lesson challenge. Tim, tell us about a teacher that really made an impact in your life. I think it's important that we get to know the stories of those OG teachers that made impacts in our lives.
Okay, the original gangster teacher for me would be Mr. John Bergen back in my 8th grade. And Mr. Bergen was a guy who believed in me. And it's hard to quantify that or explain what, exactly how that comes about. But as a kid, you just get that sense that, okay, this teacher really believes in me. And he gave me a lot of latitude, a lot of room to try things. One of the projects that I look back on, and I'm going to make myself sound like such a nerd here, but yeah, I went to him at one point and I had an interest in publishing a newspaper, surprise, surprise. And back then the word processing tools we had in I guess the very, very early 90s were pretty poor. And I said, Mr. Bergen, can I publish this class newspaper? And he gave me the space to do that and put it up on the bulletin board and put those stories together and pictures and everything. So again, maybe a little bit nerdy, but I can see that feeding into the person and the educator I am today. So and he was great to me in other ways as well. But I think it's so incredible. One of the marks of a super teacher is that we manifest our belief in kids. We always say that we love kids, but we need to show it. We need to say it. We need to give them some space to actually try things and take risks. And he took a risk by allowing me to put a class newspaper up on the wall, right? Because he's sort of handing me a degree of control. But that speaks volumes, I think, to kids. So that's something that I try to bring in a little bit of Mr. Bergen into my own practice today.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, it's first of all, I want to say it's okay to call yourself a nerd, because nerds won. We won. Look at the world now. It's run by nerds. So wear that badge with pride, because I sure as hell do. But it's exactly the thing. Look at this exposure that he gave you and the chance he gave you, and where that led to in your life, because you've got your own online magazine, and that's a direct correlation with what happened in when you were grade 8. And that teacher lit that fire in you, if we can use the analogy and the metaphor a bit further. So that's amazing. We are thankful for the teachers that we have. And that's why I included in the show. I want us to hear from different people what those characteristics of super teachers are that shaped our lives, because we can then perpetuate those qualities into our own classroom. Mm-hmm. Right. So here we go, Tim. You are only the second guest ever to do the Design a Lesson Challenge. I want to see if we've got clear victory. We've got clear victories here in the polls. Our audience have voted. So the lesson we're going to design is going to be for the senior phase, which is great, because that's where both of us really thrive, and that's where we started. So it's ages 13 to 15. So whatever that would mean. Now here's the challenge. We have to take the two most voted subjects, and we have to combine them in a lesson. So we're going to do some integrated teaching, because I do believe we can't be teaching subjects in isolation anymore. We have to start finding the connections between subjects. And the two that are upvoted here is English and Economic and Management Science. Now, this is actually amazing, because I know very little about English. My home language is Afrikaans. I can speak English and I can write academically in English, but for the actual language itself, I'm glad I've got an expert on my team. And then Economic and Management Science, it's a lot like entrepreneurship that you're actually teaching. So that helps. And I'm also teaching a third year Economics and Management Science module for the University of Johannesburg. So we've got some expertise here, and I know our audience also will assist us in this. What I need from the audience, from the people that are here, we need topics. A topic from English, or a specific strand, or anything from the English curriculum that you would teach to senior phase, so it's grades 7 to 9, and then a topic from economic and management sciences. So in the comments, in the chat, if we can see, right, Lorraine, you were in there first, so we're going to use that. Parts of speech, I've got zero idea what that means. Tim, do you know what parts of speech mean?
I know what that is, yeah.
Okay, maybe give us a quick rundown of what parts of speech is for the people who are not teaching English.
So when we're talking about parts of speech, we're talking about identifying words and their role in the sentence. So nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, interjections. I feel like I missed one.
You mentioned, I think, 3 more than what I know. Cool. And now we need one from economic and management science. Jessica, thanks for that, on creative thinking. So I think that's a nice combination to use actually with parts of speech. Is there a connection, Tim, between creative thinking and parts of speech?
You know, I was scared about this, but I think I have a direction forming here. Can I go with it? So cool. When I design a lesson in the space that I'm in, I always start with a learning target. And so, and we always frame our learning targets based on the curriculum that we follow here in Canada, and then we shape it as an I can statement. So thinking about economics and thinking about parts of speech, I wonder if we could take our middle schoolers into this space of designing marketing material that uses what we call juicy descriptors or juicy words or exciting adjectives and adverbs that will really capture their customers' attention, and also do a good job of describing the product or service that we are advertising. How am I doing so far?
Oh no, that's absolutely amazing, and this is why I wanted to include this in the show, because I want to show to student teachers and to novice teachers that, you know what, the creative part of coming up with a lesson or lesson ideas, if you just do it in isolation with yourself, the chances of you just perpetuating the same type of lesson the whole time is amplified. But as soon as you start collaborating with colleagues and you start getting ideas to start forming, you can start creating new lessons and new lesson topics and ideas. So here we've got an amazing a little activity already forming around entrepreneurship, marketing, and language. Because what is language at the end of the day? It's all about communicating. What is marketing? It is communicating effectively.
Right. Right. And I have a lot of fun with this. I mean, I mentioned I do an entrepreneurship elective at my school. And so part of the process, and by the way, it's a very authentic process because I fought for the right for my students to be able to keep the money that they earn from their product, which was great. And I'm such a firm believer. I'm going to write about that in particular at some point. But no, to get back on track. So these students went through the whole process of coming up with a product, a name, planning, purchasing, acquiring materials, of course, advertising and marketing, which is what we're talking about right now, and then taking it to the point of sale. So I love the idea. Yeah, Jessica says business plans, which, they're going to take on added complexity as you move up in grade level. But I think the language, and you mentioned that I'm an English major and I love writing. So I think the language part of it is an easy in for English if we want to make this into a PBL kind of a project. And using descriptive language, super important. We can tie in some graphic design. We can use platforms like Canva, which is incredible, or Adobe Spark to get kids to think about what are the elements of great, compelling advertising. And using descriptive language. So I would really focus this lesson on saying, okay, we're going to write up some text about this product. We're going to, use a certain number of adjectives to really define or clarify what this product will do and why a customer should buy. And so you could sort of fine tune that. But I put my learning target in the chat there. And so getting back to the person, Lorraine said parts of speech. So I would really put the focus there on precise and compelling adjectives.
That's absolutely amazing. And just think about this, because we've got, I think in our grade 7 curriculum, our kids are supposed to do a market day, so entrepreneurship day. So they have to come up with a product or a service. And then if you build it around the market day, you can actually assess not only for economic and management sciences, but you can assess for language. So you build in one big PBL, one big project. They do the project, but they get assessed with multiple rubrics or multiple assessment tools for different subjects. It's one activity that they're all involved with, but they've got separate marking criteria from different teachers or from different subjects.
You've definitely got some math outcomes as well in there, because students have to track all of their expenditures in terms of their their expenses, acquiring materials, paying any other employees, whatever they had going on the expenses side. And then the revenue side, I asked them to track all of their revenue in Google Sheets as well. And then we talk about profit and loss. And you know what? Some of my students actually lost money on this venture, which is a really good talking point and life lesson as well, because they were trying so hard to undersell their competitors, or I guess underprice their competitors, that they were successful in getting a lot of sales, but they ended up losing money. So there's some great conversations that happen around that as well from the math point of view.
And that's such a real life lesson. Isn't that what schooling should be? Like, I actually tried something and I failed, and it's okay. It's like real world, real-time feedback. And wouldn't that just be an amazing school to be part of? But what does that just do for the culture of the school if you start including projects like that?
Absolutely. I mean, as authentic as possible. Someone early in my Teachers on Fire podcast career used the term dumpster projects. And I've done a lot of dumpster projects in my teaching career, which we're talking about getting kids to make things like, for example, medieval castles that take up a ton of space and materials. We look at them all, we evaluate them, and then what do? We throw them all in the dumpster at the back of the school. So, and I'm not saying we can, in some cases we can't get away from those, but as much as we can, I love what you're saying, Francois, that we want to move into work that actually impacts real life, work that maybe improves the community, work that really, in this case, puts some hard-earned dollars in the student's pocket. That is something that, you and I appreciate, Gary Vaynerchuk. That is something that can actually shape that student and that they will take forward with them for possibly the rest of their lives. Just that taste of business, which I think can be such a good thing. So yes, authentic all the way.
And the other side of this is maybe somebody gets exposed to doing something in entrepreneurship and realizes this is not what I want to do. But I hated this so much, I don't want to continue with this and not pursue a career in entrepreneurship and rather be an employee. And that's also okay. I think Marie also mentioned here, we can include art for the Entrepreneurship Day. When you look at the marketing posters or the design layout of your stall, there's definite elements that can be assessed from the creative arts subject as well.
We have something here in our district called core competencies, which is all about the soft skills or the intangibles, right? And we get into communication and collaboration and essentially the 5 C's. And so I love this comment here from Mari, who's talking about life skills, working together. And that's an important piece too, is just the know-how to be able to collaborate and communicate, especially when opinions disagree. And so we get into some interesting negotiation skills and leadership skills too. So I love this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely great. And I see what Marie also says there is that they allow the grade 7s to have their stalls during the open day when other children are allowed to visit the school to see what the school is all about. So I mean, that's such a great, if you want to go real meta, it's marketing for the school while you're doing marketing for your store.
Right. Yeah, completely.
I'm geeking out about this because I'm an absolute teacher and I love lesson design and collaborating with my colleagues. So thank you, Tim, and thank you to everybody in the audience for assisting with the Design a Lesson Challenge. Now the task is moving over to everybody watching or listening to this. Can you please implement the lesson we just designed and let us know if you did? because it would be great to see that there's actually something tangible coming from a discussion like this. Tim, before we end off our show, where can people find you if they'd like to connect with you?
Yeah, I like to keep this really simple. It's just Teachers on Fire everywhere.
Excellent, and that's cool. Teachers on Fire, the podcast, the Medium post, the magazine, on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. I think I heard on your latest podcast, because I listened to your latest episode this morning, that you've started a Facebook group.
That's right. Yeah, this is really new. I've been told, so I don't invest a ton of energy, or I haven't historically, in Facebook, but I have a Facebook page. But what I understand and what I'm learning is all of the buzz and the activity really happens, the community stuff happens in the group. So I've just started a Facebook group at Teachers on Fire. And so if any of what I've been talking about today resonates, if that is something you are interested in, by all means, come on by, say hello. I'd love to have you in the group as well.
Awesome. And Facebook is where it's happening for teachers in South Africa. It's definitely in the Facebook groups where things are happening. Tim, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I know you're a busy man, and you've still got a lot of things that lies ahead for you in your family today, but thank you for taking the time to be on the Super Teachers Unite show.
Hey, man, I am so honored and grateful. Thank you so much. I continue to learn from you, and even just this experience is so fun. I love Crowdcast. So thank you so much again. This is amazing.
Awesome. To everybody else that's watching or listening to the show, wherever you might be in the world, I would really appreciate if you can like, subscribe, share, leave a review on the different platforms, because that gives exposure to the good work that not just me, but the entire Super Teacher community is doing. So it would be amazing if you could support us there, because the whole idea is to unite every single Super Teacher under one banner so that we can make a positive difference in each and every classroom. Until next time, my name is Francois Nordeer. This is Tim Cavey, and we are Super Teachers.